In today's video, we are going to be looking at development economics break-even analysis. This may be used to determine the financial feasibility of an option or compare various options and how feasible they are for any given development. What you will first need to do is set up a table. I've got, as always, started off with the rate of return, and then we're going to look at our costs and our cash inflow and our cash outflow, and how you organize this is really up to you. So you might decide to do a cash inflow table like we have previously, stating any assumptions, or you might like to look at variable costs and fixed costs for your cash outflow. However, you can also analyze it like this. So for example, in these first two boxes from rows 7 to 17, I have placed very rough ideas of some initial concepts which might be needed for setting up your option 1. So this is only for option 1. So if you were comparing multiple projects, you would need to do this for multiple options and just copy and paste the same sheet onto a different tab down here. So looking at option 1, do we need to consider internal demolition? Do we need to consider external demolition? Is there any internal construction that's required for the building, or external construction? This is looking at an example of if we were working on an existing building that was already standing and it required amendment. So this would obviously vary if you were doing a new build. Then we have the fit out, things you might like to consider: furniture, fittings, equipment. There's a host more. This is just a brief example to get you going. So what we are then going to do is look at units in column E, quantity in column F, and then we're going to put a price per unit in column G, and we have our total cost in column H. So what I want you to do is start off by populating your rows and have a brainstorm on a separate piece of paper the types of costs that you might need to first set up the project. So these are once-off costs, which will be in year 0. Then add in your units. Then I need you to look based on your building, this will vary obviously, well, how many meters squared of internal demolition is required, external demolition is required. How many meters squared do you need to work on for internal construction? And the same for external construction. So in this particular building, we're not demoing much and we're reconstructing about 200 meters square internally, and only needing to construct about 5 meters squared externally, which is tiny. Again, you know, this could be 500. So it really varies on your project. You can either have a rough guess based on a floor plan or off of Google Maps. Use your references and your resources available to you on the internet to populate this part here. Then you will need to look around for some rough pricing per unit. These have just been made up for the purposes of this example. Then we're going to move to column H. Over here, we want things to start being done manually. So in the green, they're items that you need to add in, noting that you need to pay particular attention to that negative sign because these are costs. And then in H, we're simply multiplying column F and column G together, and that's for each row. So in column H here, we don't want to be doing anything for the construction. Then it comes to fit out, and you can either do the same thing and do it with a meter squared, or for the purposes here, I've just popped a value in. But again, have a think, do some research, approximately what equipment is required, and have a think about if it's a total cost you're going to be using, or a per unit item, or a per meter squared. Justify here, you can place assumptions along the side here if required. So just make sure it's very clear why you've chosen those items. Here, obviously, I've made them up. That's why there's no references. Then we're going to move down and add in a row, which is total cost, which is construction, demolition, and fit out. And here, of course, we're using our sum tool. So you've summed the demolition, the construction, and the fit out costs. And if this is positive, that means you've done something wrong here. So make sure that you've got the negatives here because the money is leaving your bank account. Then we're going to add in preliminary, contingency, and overheads. This obviously will vary on the project and what research you've done as to whether these are required. Nominal percentage values, and we are just going to add them in as a percentage of the total cost and fit out. After we've completed this, we are then going to have a total option 1 setup and cost, which is shown in yellow, which is the sum of the total cost, preliminary 10%, contingency 5%, and 2.5% in overheads. Again, if this is positive at this stage, I'd check your formulas and check above, because at this stage, all we've done is sum the costs. So there should not be a positive value here. We are then going to move down and we're going to start looking at our variable costs and our fixed costs. Again, I've made these up. Please choose things that are appropriate for your project. It might be supplies and services, employee benefits, electricity bills, etc. These are things that are going to be consistently needing to be paid from year 1 onwards, is how we have done it for this example. These are yearly ongoing operational costs and expenses. Then we are going to sum this, as you can see on the screen. How you set this up is up to you. This will probably be larger than simply 2 lines, so please take note of that. Then we are going to work on our project income or benefits. Here we've got 800 tickets. So say this was a museum. We're assuming that we're going to have 800 tickets per year at $50 each, which gives us a total in column H. Again, column H is automatically populated based on how many tickets and what price they are going to be at. Then we've assumed that actually the top three stories of our high-rise building are going to be able to be rented out. So we're actually going to get facilities and rent higher income. We're assuming we're going to have 3 tenants, and per year they are only going to pay $10,000. Absolute bargain. You might pop that up to $50,000. It really depends how you want to do it. And again, this is populated. Yearly fees always. Then we might have sale of goods. So if we keep with the museum item, down here we've got 500 people or 500 trinkets or magnets, etc., being sold each year, and we're popping them in at $9.50 per keychain, etc. And then again in column H, we have our total per year for that income. We then need to sum those items, and again, your project income and benefit table will be larger than 3 items, most likely. And on the right-hand side here, I would add in references and assumptions as appropriate. So for example, if you're saying that your sale of goods is going to be 900, then you would need to justify why we're selling more items in the trinket store than we are selling tickets to the museum. This is where you show your marker where these items have come from and show that they are justified and realistic. We are then going to add in our net cash flow in row 40, column H, and we are adding total expenses, which is negative $25,000, which is H31, and we're adding total income or benefits, which is H38. This may be positive or negative, as this is varying per year. So we are now going to add in our internal rate of return. Again, this might be 5%, it might be 10%. please ensure that this is showing as a percentage icon. Then we're going to add in our years. I've done this as approximately a 7-year project. You may have this going to 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Again, make assumptions as appropriate. Cash outflows and costs. So here we are going to auto-populate everything. So we have our net cost, which is for year 0. And in this project, we are assuming that I might make an assumption here, museum to open in 2023 to the public. So we are assuming, oops. Okay, well, you know what that says. There we go. Much better. So we are assuming here that in year 0, which we've got in column D, we are only doing the initial setup cost, which we have shown as 787. Again, it's negative. So that's why we have that as H25. Then every year after that, we're assuming that the total expenses, which we calculated as above, is maintained. If this varies, again, you can vary it. For the purposes of this example, I'm just saying that they're exactly the same every year. And again, it's the same all throughout. Then we're going to add in our cash inflow or annual benefits. And because the museum is closed and we couldn't rent out the top 3 floors of the skyscraper we're building, there are no net benefits for year 0 because this year is the year that we spend money. We are not making money. However, in the first year, ticket sales are up. We've got 800 ticket sales, 3 tenants and 500 trinkets being sold, which is where this value comes from. And again, I've maintained that we are consistent throughout. This may vary and you may need to consult the other NPV videos that we've created for how you work out multiple items here. Then we are going to discount the costs. So in D54, we are discounting the costs. So we have NPV bracket, we have the required rate of return, comma, sum of years 1 to 7, end bracket, plus the initial net cost of year 0. We are then going to do the discounted benefits, which is NPV bracket, required rate of return, comma, sum of years 1 to 7 net benefits, end bracket, plus the initial year 0 benefits. In this case, this was 0. However, for good practice, please still add it in because in your project, there may be a benefit to year 1. So we have discounted costs, discounted benefits. Now let's do net cash flow. And again, this is in D, we have the sum of D49 and D52, which is net cost at year 0 and net benefit at year 0. And then for year 1 net cash flow, it's the sum of year 1 net cost and year 1 net benefit. And that's the same throughout all the way to year 7. Then we are going to calculate our discounted cash flow, which is the net cash flow divided by 1 plus the required rate of return, end bracket, to the power of what year we are looking at. And we've used this formula multiple times. If you're unfamiliar, please have a look at our other NPV and internal rate of return videos. Now, as you can see, despite having the same net cash flow per year, our discounted cash flow is actually going down. And this is a good indicator that when your net cash flow is the same, if your discounted cash flow is also the same, you might have not created the correct formula with the power of to the year. So it's very important to check this and check your formulas. And we've done, I should note, we've done these 2 items for if you would like to calculate the benefit cost ratio. However, what we're interested in is the net present value for break-even analysis. Now, as always, I like to do the net present value doing the sum of the discounted cash flow from years 0 to 7 as shown on screen. However, it's also good practice to do the net present value formula as well. And again, we always check they should not be dollar signs. And again, we should always check, do these two values match? Now, we know from our previous studies that when the NPV value is greater than 0, the present value of the inflows is greater than the present value of the outflows. Therefore, the money earned on the investment is worth more today than the costs, and it is a good investment. When the NPV is less than 0, which is what we have here on screen, the present value of the inflows is less than the present value of the outflows, and it is potentially a very bad investment. Then NPV is 0. Well, this is when the present value of the inflows is equal to the present value of the outflows, and there is no difference in value between the value of money earned and the value of money invested. And this here is showing that the project won't add any necessary value. But what we're going to look at today is looking at a break-even analysis. And the break-even analysis can be calculated a multitude of ways. But today we're looking at how to calculate it when your net present value is equal to 0. So we need to set up the table in a similar way to how I have done so on screen. Pause and then come back. Then what you'll need to do is go to the data tab up the top of your Excel spreadsheet, and we're going to click on the net present value. So we're clicking on D61. We're then going back up to the top ribbon, the data ribbon, and clicking What If Analysis. You will then left click on Goal Seek. Using Goal Seek, we want to set the cell. What cell are we setting? The net present value cell. What cell do we want to set it to? To the value of 0. Why? Because we're having a look at when does the net present value equal 0. And then this is the fun part. Well, relatively fun, I guess. Fun's probably not the right word. But we are changing the cell. This is where your input comes in. So here we might decide that in our particular project, we can amend how many rooms or how many floors we rent or at what price. So say, for example, I'm looking to see how many rooms we would need to rent out to break even or to hit an NPV of 0. So that's inputs match outputs. I'm going to change this cell here, which is F35 for rent and facilities hire, and that is the unit or the quantity. I'm then going to click OK. And at this point, we know that if we scroll up, we potentially need 14 rental facilities in order to break even. We don't particularly like that. Let's have a look at what else we could do. So we're going to go Goal Seek, NPV, value 0. What cell are we going to change? Actually, I think it might be easier to change how much we charge because $10,000 does seem a little cheap. Okay, and now we've been told if we want, so really you want the target value to be 0. In the last example, it came up with sort of a random number. You want target value 0, current value 0. We now know, and I'll highlight this for you, that I need to charge a minimum of $47,334.58 if I'm only hiring out the 3 rooms in order for the break-even NPV to be 0. So if I want a net present value of 0, I need to be charging this much. And that really helps show, is that feasible? So obviously this is a made up scenario. But when we're commenting in a report, or if we're commenting in our assignment, we would say something along the lines of the result of the break-even analysis shows that for the museum skyscraper to be financially feasible, 3 floors equivalent to an income of $48,000 or more per year would need to be rented for the income and fixed variable costs to break even. Any additional income received as rent on top of this 3 rooms will be making the project a profit. That there shows your marker or your lecturer that you understand why you've changed this value and what that means. Now, we know that that's 47, and I'm just going to move that to the side so we have a copy of it. We know that we're at 0, and again, it's really good to have both just to make sure that they're both still at 0. So you want both of these to be 0 for it to be a real answer. But here, I'm actually going to say, you know what? We've spent a bit of extra money on it. The rooms are looking flash. The 3 people are going to hire out those top 3 stories, no problems at all. And we come down here and holy dooly, we are making such a large profit that I have to adjust my column widths. So that is a really good way to move things around. Or I might say, okay, you know what, we were being a bit crazy. It's not that good. 80,000, look, we are still in profit here. So this is the sort of thing that you can do to move it around. Alternatively, you might have said, well, hang on a second, how much do we need to spend on furniture? Currently, the budget is 50. Maybe the client needs to decrease how much they're spending on furniture. However, it's always a good idea to have a play around with either your expenses and try and reduce your expenses per year or increase your profit. Obviously, if this is an accounting course, it's more complex and you'll need to add a bit more depth to your analysis. For construction economics, this is a really good way of, like I said, popping in whether that project is financially feasible or not. When you've been asked to look at different economic factors for your construction project, I would also comment on the NPV and what that means if it's greater than 1, less than 1. And I would also comment on that benefit cost ratio as we have done previously. So now we know how to use NPV to calculate that break-even point. As always, if you've got any questions, please post them in the comments box and I will happily answer them for you. Thank you.